B. Me, 28-year-old female. Work as 911 dispatcher for city emergency services. Always considered myself compassionate person who cares about helping people. Spend 40 hours weekly taking emergency calls from people in crisis. Notice something disturbing about my own reactions to different callers. When women call crying about domestic violence or assault, feel immediate protective rage. Stay on the line, honey. Help is coming. You're going to be okay. When men call about being attacked or beaten, first reaction is often skepticism. Are you sure you didn't start the fight? What did you do to provoke this? Realize I automatically assume men are somehow responsible for violence against them. Start paying attention to how other female dispatchers handle male callers. Pattern emerges of less urgency and empathy for male victims. Woman calls about being robbed. Entire team mobilizes with compassion. Poor thing, she must be so traumatized. Man calls about identical robbery. Response is more clinical and detached. File report with responding officers. Here's your case number. Clear double standard and emotional investment based on caller's gender. Attend monthly training meeting about crisis response protocols. Instructor discusses importance of showing empathy to all emergency callers. Everyone deserves compassionate response regardless of demographics. But notice that examples used focus entirely on female victims. Male suffering either ignored or mentioned as less serious afterthought. When I bring up male suicide rates during discussion, room goes quiet. That's not really the focus of today's training. Apparently, male crisis calls don't warrant special consideration. Week later, handle call from man, threatening suicide on bridge. He's crying, explains that wife left with kids, lost job, facing homelessness. Nobody cares if I live or die anymore. My instinctive response is to question his motives rather than offer comfort. Are you just trying to get attention? This isn't going to solve anything. Contrast this with female suicide call from previous day. Spent 30 minutes validating her feelings and promising things would improve. Realize I show dramatically different levels of compassion based on gender. Start documenting my responses to different types of emergency calls. Female domestic violence calls receive average 12 minutes of emotional support. Male domestic violence calls average 4 minutes, with focus on filing reports. Unconsciously prioritize women's emotional needs over men's safety. Even when men report being stabbed or seriously injured by partners. Review statistics on domestic violence calls in our district. Discover that 40% of victims are male, but only 15% get referred to support services. Female victims automatically connected with shelters and counseling. Male victims told to work things out or be more careful next time. Systematic bias against male suffering built into emergency response system. Handle call from elderly man who fell and broke hip. He's alone, scared, been lying on floor for 6 hours before calling. My response is efficient but cold, focused on medical logistics. Paramedics will be there in 10 minutes. Stay still. Similar call from elderly woman last week received warm reassurance. Don't worry, sweetie. You're being so brave. Help is almost there. Spent extra time comforting her while rushing man off phone. Notice pattern extends beyond just me to entire dispatch center. Female supervisors show same bias toward prioritizing women's emergencies. Male callers often put on hold longer or transferred between departments. Women's calls handled with kid gloves and maximum sensitivity. Men expected to handle crisis situations without emotional support. Attend community meeting about emergency services and public safety. Room full of women discussing how to better protect female residents. Extensive discussion of domestic violence resources and women's shelters. When man raises issue of male suicide rates in community, immediately dismissed. That's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Women's safety treated as community priority. Men's survival as personal problem. Start researching actual emergency response data for gender disparities. Discover shocking patterns of differential treatment based on caller's sex. Female medical emergencies receive faster response times on average. Male psychiatric emergencies more likely to result in arrest than treatment. Women's reports of violence investigated more thoroughly than men's. Systemic devaluation of male suffering throughout emergency services. Handle call from college student reporting sexual assault. Female student receives immediate victim services, referral, and emotional support. You're so brave for calling, this isn't your fault. Next week, male student calls reporting identical assault by female. My response focuses on evidence gathering rather than emotional care. Are you sure you didn't consent? Why didn't you fight back? Unconsciously applying different standards of victimhood based on gender. Colleague overhears me dismissing male assault victim. Good catch, these guys usually regret hookups later. Bonding with female coworkers over shared skepticism of male victims. Treating male sexual trauma as less legitimate than female experiences. Work overnight shift, covering domestic disturbance calls. Pattern emerges of treating female perpetrators more leniently than male. Woman attacks husband with knife, referred to anger management. Man pushes wife during argument, arrested for domestic battery. Identical violent behavior receives drastically different legal responses. Female violence minimized as emotional outburst requiring therapy. Male violence criminalized as dangerous threat, requiring punishment. Handle suicide attempt. Call from middle-aged man. He took pills after losing custody of children in divorce. Explains feeling like failure as father and provider. My internal reaction is irritation rather than compassion. Men always threaten suicide to manipulate their ex-wives. Never questioned this assumption, despite lack of evidence. Same night, female suicide attempt receives completely different response. Woman took pills after breakup with boyfriend. Spend 20 minutes validating her pain and promising better future. You have so much to live for. Don't let him win. Drastically different levels of empathy for identical situations. Start examining my personal relationships with this new awareness. Realize I show minimal concern for male friends' emotional problems. When female friends complain about anxiety or depression, immediately offer support. When male friends mention similar struggles, change subject quickly. Have you tried working out more? That usually helps. Treating male mental health as simple problem requiring simple solutions. Female mental health as complex issue deserving extensive care and attention. Attend family gathering, observe how female relatives treat men. Uncle going through difficult divorce becomes target of criticism. He should have tried harder to make marriage work. Typical man gives up when things get tough. No empathy for loss of access to his children or financial devastation. Same women organized fundraiser for female cousin's medical bills. Male suffering attributed to personal failings rather than circumstances deserving support. Brother mentions feeling lonely and isolated after breakup. Female family members dismiss his feelings as temporary inconvenience. He'll find someone else soon. Men always bounce back. No recognition that men form deep emotional attachments worthy of grief. Expectation that men should process relationship loss without support. Notice how women around me react to male vulnerability in general. Man cries during emotional conversation. Women become uncomfortable. Why is he being so dramatic? Woman cries, immediately surrounded by supportive female friends. Male emotional expression viewed as manipulation or weakness. Female emotional expression viewed as authentic and deserving care. Handle emergency call from homeless man reporting assault. Attacked by group of teenagers, seriously injured and bleeding. My response lacks urgency or compassion, typically shown to female victims. Do you want to press charges or just get medical attention? No validation of trauma or acknowledgement of his suffering. Treat him like statistic rather than human being deserving empathy. Contrast with homeless woman call from previous month. Spent 15 minutes reassuring her and coordinating extensive services. Honey, you don't deserve this. We're going to get you help. Same violent crime receives dramatically different emotional responses. Research showed that male homeless population faces higher rates of violence, but receives significantly less public sympathy or support services. Society views homeless men as dangerous nuisances rather than vulnerable victims. Women seen as people who fell on hard times deserving assistance. Start questioning whether women are biologically capable of empathy toward men. Evolutionary psychology suggests female empathy directed toward offspring and tribe. Male suffering outside immediate family may trigger no compassionate response. Explains historical pattern of male disposability in times of crisis. Women and children saved first while men expected to sacrifice themselves. Attend workshop on trauma-informed emergency response. Entire curriculum focuses on recognizing female trauma patterns. No discussion of how trauma manifests differently in male callers. Male trauma responses pathologized rather than understood. Men who seem angry during calls are probably dangerous. No consideration that anger might be male expression of fear or pain. Handle call from father whose son died in car accident. Man barely able to speak through grief over losing child. My response more focused on procedural requirements than emotional support. Will need you to identify the body and contact funeral home. Similar call from mother last year received extensive emotional care. Stayed on phone until family arrived to provide support. Unconsciously view male grief as less profound than female, despite identical loss and identical need for compassion. Speak with male paramedic about patterns he's observed. Female dispatchers definitely treat us differently than female callers. Describes receiving less support during traumatic calls. When female paramedics need emotional debriefing, resources immediately available. Male paramedics expected to process trauma alone without assistance. We're supposed to be tough enough to handle anything. Systematic denial of male emotional needs even in helping professions. Start documenting instances of anti-male bias in emergency services. Patterns so pervasive it affects every aspect of crisis response. From initial call handling to resource allocation to follow-up care. Women prioritized at every stage while men treated as expendable. 6 months of conscious observation reveals uncomfortable truth. I don't naturally care about male suffering, the way I do, female. Empathy for men requires conscious effort, while compassion for women is automatic. Deeply ingrained programming that values female well-being over male. Question whether this pattern exists in other female-dominated helping professions. Nursing, social work, education, all show similar biases against male clients. Systematic devaluation of male human worth disguised as caring profession. Begin changing approach to male emergency callers. Offer same validation and support. I automatically give women. Notice immediate improvement in outcomes and caller satisfaction. Men respond positively when treated with genuine compassion, rather than suspicion and clinical detachment. Start advocating for gender-neutral emergency response protocols. Challenge female colleagues when they dismiss male callers. He's probably lying about being attacked by his girlfriend. Why didn't he just leave if she was really abusing him? Lose friendships for defending male victims and challenging female assumptions. Apparently caring about male suffering makes me traitor to sisterhood. Now, work training dispatchers to recognize their own gender biases. Coordinate with others fighting systematic discrimination in emergency services. Learn that women's empathy toward men is conditional and limited. Extends only to men who serve female interests or family members. Stranger men suffering alone receive minimal compassion or concern. Discovered that answer to original question is uncomfortable truth. Most women don't genuinely care about male suffering unless it affects them personally. Empathy reserved for women, while men treated as disposable resources. Systematic devaluation of male humanity hidden behind rhetoric of caring. True compassion requires recognizing suffering regardless of victim's gender.